everyone. Afternoon, everyone. We've now made it into the afternoon. So we had quite an intense morning, and what I'm going to do in this talk is try and get our energy going, some crowd participation. There'll be a section that we'll try and make a bit interactive, get our energy going, and what I wanted to do is build on some of the topics we've already heard from this morning. It's about tech talent, it's about the difficulty in hiring, but how with a change of perspective, we can make very rapid progress. And I'm going to introduce myself properly later in the talk, but first, just to set the scene, who can remember the chaos that we had earlier in the year, the travel chaos? I'm up in Manchester, tried to get away, we just couldn't get through security. This is Heathrow. Earlier in the year, maybe this time last year, the lorry driver shortage, not enough lorry drivers, food prices rising, massive shortage of nurses and doctors in the NHS, getting bigger and wider, and quite recently, shortage of gas, energy prices. What do all of these things kind of possibly have in common, and why is that relevant to this room? Well, we kind of know that it's the concept of a pipeline. So pipeline effectively is delivering a ready-made stream of things, materials, people, talent into an industry. And we had a shortage of baggage handlers, of pilots, of lorry drivers, of nurses, and doctors. So what about tech? Well, we've heard a number of statistics today. I've got some of my own to try and kind of grapple quantify this issue. So what you can see is the big circles in AI and cloud, in software engineering specifically, that's the number of new jobs coming on stream. The smaller green circles are the number of people with those skills today. Then these are global numbers. And the even smaller circles within the small circles is the sort of, in particular, the representation of women or kind of minority ethnic folks in that industry. So what we can see clearly is, as we all know, stating the obvious, demand for skills kind of just extraordinarily outstrips the available supply. We all know that. And that's why we kind of hear we're in a tech and diversity crisis. Becky pointed this stat out. I doubled over when I saw it myself. 1 in 115, 1 woman for every 115 software jobs. So can we all agree it's a pipeline problem? That would be the conventional wisdom. We've all probably experienced it. As we just heard, you put your job advert out, just not enough applicants, full stop, let alone diverse applicants. And it kind of feels a satisfying, maybe quite a neat explanation. It's a pipeline problem. But I think there's something missing here, and this has been my experience. It's kind of, my personal experience is that's kind of the wrong way to think about it. And, when we think about a pipeline problem, it's kind of like, oh yeah, that's the problem over there. That's a problem before the industry. So what can I do about it? There's not enough people in the system. In my view and my personal experience, tech doesn't actually have a pipeline problem. But who am I and why should you listen to me? I'll introduce myself now. So I'm the founder of a company called Academy. I'll tell you a little bit about what we do. Before that, I spent about a decade of my life working in a high-growth tech company up in the north of England. So I started as a recruiter, had huge stress. I joined the company just after we raised a round of venture capital. We were about 50 people strong at the time. And kind of very luckily, but also kind of quite pressured, the company exploded. It was called the Hut Group in online retail more than a decade ago. And we grew from 50 to 5,000 people in my time there. I kind of surfed that wave, ended up as chief people officer. And the challenge was we had to hire about 1,000 net new people a year in the north of England that were technology or digital people as we kind of expanded. And that was just extraordinarily stressful time. And that's led to kind of some of the insights I'm going to go on to share. But in the process, we kind of managed to do it. We managed to build one of the highest performing and most diverse teams in our industry and arguably anywhere in the world in that kind of process. Starting in a kind of pretty rural part of the Northwest, a town called Northwich towards Crewe. No one should really ever visit. It's not a glamorous place. But as we started to make inroads into this problem, we took some approaches that were started to be recognized as quite different. So we got featured in the Wall Street Journal, in the Times. We started to do kind of quite innovative things. Eventually we grew and our profile raising, and suddenly folks were coming to see us to learn kind of what was going on. We had national leaders, world leaders, culminating in a massive IPO. I mean, at the time, at the height of COVID, it was the first kind of tech IPO for 5 years in the UK, multi-billion-pound thing. My boss became a billionaire. If you check the share price today, he's no longer a billionaire. As with most companies, that kind of peaked in the kind of COVID period. And since my experience at THG, I've gone on to set up Academy. And now we're working with dozens of technology companies across 4 continents to kind of focus on this problem, skills and diversity. So I now want to introduce the concept of a pyramid. We've talked about pipeline, and this is the interactive bit. So this is a talent pyramid. Every industry, every company needs a functioning talent pyramid. So if you think about it from a company perspective, let's take a department, let's take the tech department. Well, you probably expect to see at the top the CTO, maybe some senior engineering folks, directors, a wider layer below that mid-level, and hopefully a wider layer below that at entry level. So every company, of course, would expect to have more people at the lower levels than the top levels, and that's reflective of industries. Industries need us as well. So now I just want to run a little exercise with folks here as we start to think about the comparison between industries, between maybe functioning industries and tech. So I've just picked an industry at random, the services industry. So these are companies like KPMG, Deloitte, PwC. This is law firms. Oh, we've lost. So law firms, banks, consulting firms. The services industry in the UK is a dominant part of GDP. Some of these companies have been going on for decades. And the question I have for this room is how many, out of every 100 vacancies in this industry, how many do you think go to new people, entry people, out of 100? Give you 5 seconds to come up with an answer in your heads. Hold that number. And now if I could ask you all to stand, and for those who can't stand, to put your hands up. Up we come. Remember your number. So how this will work is I'm going to say a number, I'm going to say 100. If that's your number or lower, you can sit down. And so I might say 100 if you think that 90 people in the sort of 90 vacancies go to new people, you can stay still up. Make sense? Okay, 100. Yeah, good, we're all stood up. I can confirm there's less than 100 of these roles go to new people. What about 90? 80? 70? 60? Interesting. 50? 40? 30? 25? 20? 15? 10, 5. What's your number?
3?
Yeah.
Yeah, mine's 3 as well.
So, kind of drum roll, please. What is the answer? It's actually 23. So 23 in 100 roles in the services industry go to new people. That's not bad. That's a pretty good base. It's a stable industry. Some of these firms have been going for decades, and clearly there's a system here to absorb new people into the industry. So same exercise. Up we come. I mean, this is the exciting one. This is what we're all here for. You know, what is the equivalent statistic in the tech industry? It's growing. The tech industry is growing 8 times faster than the services industry. It's a huge driver of economic growth. So same thing, have a number in your head, 5 seconds. Out of every 100 vacancies in tech, how many go to new people? 100, 90, 80, 60, 50, 40, 30, 20, 15, quite a lot more people stood up than the last time, 10, 5, you're cheating. So tech industry, how many, out of every 100 vacancies, how many go to new people? The answer's 4. And, you know, when I discovered this, I kind of felt it from experience, but it's pretty shocking when you see it like this. So when people say tech has a pipeline problem, I kind of think, no, it doesn't. It has a pyramid problem. And what would, you know, tech's talent pyramid is effectively toppling over. There's no roots in. So what this means is the industry at large and then the majority of companies are not open to new talent. But there's a huge shortage, skills and diversity, as we saw earlier. So why is this happening? You know, in your tech departments, in your engineering departments, you've got people who are phenomenally brilliant at pattern recognition. And in tech, pattern recognition is an extraordinary thing. It's a big advantage. But when it comes to hiring, it can be extraordinarily limiting. Pattern recognition can lead to bias. And we're starting from a point where software engineers and technologists more broadly are kind of disproportionately from a certain profile. White men. We hear lots of these sorts of things. Companies tell us we only hire seniors. And we kind of understand why it happens, because we're all in organizations, I certainly was, that it's just growing so fast. You need people who can hit the ground running. It feels like junior people might take more time to mentor, to train, to develop. So maybe it's just quicker and easier to hire a senior. And that's kind of what we hear a lot. Who can remember this from a few months ago? And you're getting these sorts of things happening all the time where we talked a bit about it earlier this morning, where companies are making absurd requirements from people entering the industry. This is the founder of a specific technology who wouldn't be able to get a job in his own technology. And this is effectively gatekeeping. So gatekeeping is to control or limit access to something or an industry. And this gatekeeping is keeping a whole bunch of people who haven't had the same opportunity or privilege to gain that experience out. And the people it keeps out, by the way, are disproportionately women, you know, black and other minority ethnic and other disadvantaged backgrounds in terms of social mobility. And this is a sort of status quo that we come up against in tech. And it's certainly the status quo I came up against in the early days of the Hut Group trying to get more people in. And we know about the concept, or we'll have heard about the concept of tech debt. This is something that happens when your engineering or your technology decisions are short-term. So when you're very short-term focused, you end up with a bunch of tech debt. What happens when your hiring decisions are very short-term? We need people who can hit the ground running. You end up with team debt, and in particular, diversity debt. And I mean, we've again touched on it earlier, diversity debt is quite a nasty thing. You know, if you're from a non-traditional or underserved background, joining a team of 8 white men isn't a great sign. If it's 80 white men, well, you can imagine that's very, very daunting. And so if you can't hire diverse talent, it's effectively going to be a huge bottleneck to your company or your industry's ability to get more people like that in. So this is our status quo, a toppling talent pyramid, an industry that is starving for the skills, yet has the gate shut. And it's leaving a crumbling pyramid. Whilst we're kind of busy gatekeeping out, the pyramid is crumbling. And I guess this is where I kind of want to now go into optimism mode. Based on my experience and the work we did at THG and also at Academy and the brilliant work I see others do, there are ways of building high-performing teams, diverse teams, scaling talent that can give you a competitive edge. And so I'm going to share some of the insights that I learned at THG, some of the work we're doing with partners here to solve some of these issues. And the reason for this picture is kind of there was a point in time, an inflection point, where rather than gatekeeping, we realized if we built some bridges out, if we built some bridges into communities and tried to bring them into our company and our industry, perhaps we would get an advantage. And the core kind of concept we developed is to screen people in based on their potential, not out based on their experience. And this led to us just having a radically more inclusive approach to hiring. And it kind of just turbocharged the growth of the company. When we took that sort of approach, that one single approach of trying to screen people in, not out, we quickly discovered that talent was actually very, very abundant. We went from a situation where, from kind of one week to the next, we just couldn't find the talent for our jobs, to having hundreds, thousands, and tens of thousands of people who could be relevant. And we made very, very rapid progress. We got this working in days and weeks, not months and years. And when we take that approach now at Academy, we've proved to both ourselves outside of THG and dozens of companies now that you can immediately access a far wider, a more diverse pool of people. Some really brilliant folks who've gone on to all kinds of extraordinary companies. And in the process, step by step, trying to reconstruct that toppling tech talent pyramid. So what are some kind of practical steps we could do to try and kind of make some inroads? I think there were 3 key things we've developed which kind of work here. The first thing I've touched on, a playbook for potentially bypassing the skill shortage and turbocharging your teams. We talked about the idea of screening people in, not out. So hiring for potential and the ability to kind of predict who might be successful. So what we do is look for forward-looking indicators of success. Then we decided, well, actually, we need to kind of figure out how to then train these people for some skills. At THG, we took some of our engineers, we just made them teachers. And we decided that, okay, we're going to dedicate a few resources to training new folks up. And by the way, the new folks weren't all grads. Some were school leavers, some were career switchers, some came from our warehouse, some came from our customer services. By new talent, I mean kind of people who had not previously worked in technology, but had the interest, the passion, the aptitude to do so. And the crucial thing then is, so you've got a pool of people who are hungry, passionate, driven. You spend some time with them to kind of get them industry-grade skills, but you've not only got to train the talent, you've got to train your company or your teams to receive the talent. And so if you're working with managers, getting them ready to receive diverse talent, improving their coaching skills, improving their mentoring skills, really unblocks the bottleneck here. We developed this kind of method to kind of look at the forward predictors of success. And they're kind of three things that mark someone out as being high potential. Effectively IQ, EQ, and drive. So aptitude, which you can test and measure, EQ, ability to work with others, and drive, being sheer motivation. And those attributes can come from any demographic of person. And what that does is you completely just flip the aperture. So you suddenly have a massive top of funnel, which you can kind of go after. And it's both quality and rigorous, because it's quite selective, yet it's extraordinarily diverse. This is the sort of tech academy started building inside of the company, where we're kind of effectively offering completely free training by industry experts, because they were our own engineers. And at Academy, we're doing that as well. And the work to kind of upskill your kind of managers and make them great coaches, it turns out that the things you have to do as a company to absorb new talent are actually brilliant things to do anyway. And so we discovered this incredible multiplier impact where we started to survey all of our engineers. We put managers through some training and coaching and mentoring because we wanted them to get ready to absorb some of this new talent. We then surveyed our non-entry level engineers, so the rest of the team, and unanimously they all said their experience of working at the company and their manager dramatically improved. And so that was a very interesting observation. The things you have to do to absorb new talent are brilliant things to do more broadly. And the outcome for us, and the outcome we've been able to deliver time and time again, is a huge step change of diverse technologists in the pipeline. And these people are reaching mid-level in 12 months. You train the talent and the manager, and you just get this extraordinary effect. And so that reservation we have, we only hire seniors. Well, how do you get them? You can kind of develop them at scale quicker than you think, as I say, in weeks and months, not years and years. Find high potential talent, spend some time training them, turn your managers into great coaches. Of course, you can try and do that yourselves. You can partner with us, you can partner with other extraordinary organizations. There's lots of people focused on this. But that's the kind of broad experience I went through, and why I think the idea that it's a pipeline problem is a little bit lazy. As leaders, we've probably got an opportunity to open that gate, build bridges in, and build our companies. And so, yeah, that's me.
Excellent.